All right, so this is a raw edition of Story Tiles, which essentially is just a precursor to my podcast. I wanted to do this because I have been working on a third type of solo mode. Normally, solo modes consist of solo journaling and sometimes of random table generation, RTG. I'm talking about role-playing games that you can perform solo, not necessarily board games, but I did want to introduce some board game mechanics. So, to sort of organize my own thoughts, I've come up with this system that incorporates three elements. First of all, a pre-generated role-playing adventure that you normally just play with a group, but now we're going to attempt to play solo. So as opposed to typical solo adventures that come out maybe in the same range, whereas in a solo adventure, you would actually just have passages like a choose your own adventure, at the end of which you make choices and then you move on to another paragraph. You maybe, fight or interact with NPCs in a typical standard manner normal to the role-playing game that you're playing in. You would just be reading a story and interacting with it with a few mechanical items. So you would perhaps maybe use some dice, and you would roll some dice and you'd see what the results is, add some modifiers, etc., etc. That is not the type of solo adventure that I want to examine. I want to basically have a system that translates or parses the adventure that is meant for a group so you can play it solo. Now, there are obviously some obstacles to this. First, and most of all, which is this is all information meant for the dungeon master or the game master, and not for the players. There's a lot of information in here that essentially relates to characters, to locations, to items, plot lines that players are not aware of at the beginning. So how do you capture that? How do you capture all that information so you can interact with it later, but also store it away in a manner that you as the active player are not aware of? So I came up with the Mentor Adventure system. I call it A.M.P. And A.M.P is a way to have a dualistic approach towards these adventures. Basically, you cut an adventure in half, you read or you parse the adventure page by page, and in between pages, you act upon that knowledge depending on whether it's knowledge that you could know, that you won't know just yet, or immediately actionable. Now, to examine further briefly what my draft concept is so far, the parsing part of the solo mode is that you read one page of the adventure and you just read it as you would basically a novel. Of course, you are then instantly aware of certain plot lines. Typically, these kind of adventures, they line out the main plot line, the main mystery in the first few pages. That's no problem, because your mentor, your spiritual guide, and this can be an actual person, this can be like an oracle that travels with you, it could be a book or a case of scrolls or an orb which you use for divination. It can be anything basically that fulfills the role of something that holds knowledge that you as the adventurer do not know yet. And I'm going to come to the adventure a little bit later. But the mentor has this information, reads it, you're performing the role as the author or as the mentor, and you're storing that knowledge into a table. Each time when you come upon a piece of knowledge that either relates to a character, to an event, a location, or an item, you would put it into a table that is divided into 13 parts according to a standard suit of a deck of cards. And the idea is that the information is either information that is immediately actionable, that you can act upon as your adventure part. in which case you don't actually have to put it into the table. There will be a spot on your character sheet, which I don't have here because it's of course system dependent, but you would have a specific box on your adventure sheet that says actionable items, and you just tick them off because these are things that you immediately see. For instance, you walk into a dungeon room and you see a chest, you see a bed, you see a closet. These are things that you can immediately engage with because you're immediately aware of them. Now, one step higher than that would be walking through a dungeon and wanting to open a door. The door is the actionable item, but you don't know what's behind the door. You don't know the room just yet. Now, you may have already read in your adventure what's behind that door. So you would have, for instance, you're walking through this tower and you want to go up one level. That is your actionable item that you can immediately interact with, but you don't know what's on the next level. And that information actually goes into the table then, because that is information that you can interact with through your mentor by basically researching that info or observing that info, which we'll come to in a little bit later. But the first step is that you put it into the table. So how would you do that? I made a quick example here because this table probably is going to have to be a lot bigger, but you would essentially just say like, okay, let's see, I have, for instance, I read through the first page, which in this case holds like the plot line. And I would say, for instance, okay, so this is information for the GM that is not related to the adventure story per se, but the blue tome. It says here, this adventure sees the alliance of Core Sign establishing itself more firmly in the Bornland. Now, Bornland is a location. There is an alliance of Core. Now, we don't know exactly what it is. It may actually be on the rest of the page one. So you do have to read the whole page. But then you parse the page, you translate the page, and you say, okay, the Alliance of Core, that is something that we need to know because that is obviously a major deal. Or the Blue Tome, for instance. You could also write that. That's an item. Let's go with Blue Tome. So we write in the first box, we can write Blue Tome. Now, before I do that, there is a small distinction in the way that you jot down information. So like a suit of cards, you would have an ace, you would have 2 through 10, and then you have the jack, the queen, and the king. The jack and the queen are hiding underneath here. What are they doing? Okay, so the jack, the queen, and the king, the ace, and 2 through 10. The idea of the table is that the ace is like a freebie, like just to start you off, because it is very hard to start off an adventure. And if you don't have like some general information of what you need to do or where you need to go or who you have to interact with, then you could be immediately lost. And this is not a random table generation, so you can't just generate the info. This is also not a solo journaling, although it has aspects of it. So you don't immediately get a prompt that starts you off. So the ace card, the ace row in this case, is freebie information that is of a high level that you immediately get. So you are entering your adventure knowing at least something. So maybe you do know about the Blue Tome. We can write this down. So the Blue Tome. And I'm going to write down the page number, which is, in this case, page number 5. I'm going to write the page number here so I can always refer back to the adventure module if I want to know more about the Blue Tome. But this is information that right now I do get for free. So I don't have to interact with it as an adventurer. I don't have to interact with my mentor. This is information I get for free just to sort of start the adventure off. Now, other high-level information, say that there's another item here. I'm just going to make something up. So say that this shield has some significance, for instance, like it's a shield that you need to protect yourself against maybe the Alliance of Core, and in order to sort of go through their defenses and retrieve the Blue Tome, which is something that you may have to do in this adventure. Who knows? We don't know yet. But so this shield, say that it is described in here, that would be a second item. Now you could decide to use the shield as free information instead of the Blue Tome. That's up to you, because first you're reading through it and you fill in afterwards the table with actionable items. Now, I'm choosing to give myself the Blue Tome as free information, so I know some stuff about the Blue Tome. to be exact what's described here, but the shield, for instance, that might be like a major item. That may not be like a typical item, but that may be something that the book indicates is like a major plot line, in which case I would store it underneath the Joker, the Queen, or the King, and I would write it down here. So let's just say it's called the Shield of Core. That's also page 5. Now I've written it down here, and the Jack, the Queen, and the King information is not directly available. That is to say, through the adventure, through going maybe through some other items first, or other characters, or other locations or plot, I might end up getting to the Shield of Core. If it were like a minor item, say that there's also something described as, or a minor location, so Bornland, for instance, that might not be like a major location. Say that Bornland is just a minor place where you first start off. So maybe we want to know more about Bornland. So we'll write down Bornland, page 5. And this is not directly an actionable item. It's more sort of a descriptive, because we don't know what exactly we have to do in Bornland. We don't know if, we have to go to the city hall, if there's a forest nearby, if there's a monastery or whatever not. These are items that will gradually get filled in underneath here. There's 6 spots, 3 short ones, 2 middle long, and 1 long one, just basically for the pure act of writing just a single word, maybe 2 or 3 words, and maybe a sentence. And you can fill those in as you discover that information in the adventure module, maybe on subsequent pages. So maybe we read something about a monastery. We can put the monastery here. This is the second spot. You can see here there's Roman numerals 1 through 6 that indicates specific information relating to the main topic, but very specific, more actionable items. So we put monastery there. Now, we do the same for like plot, characters, items, etc., etc. The idea is that you're populating this table, but then you also take the corresponding cards that belong with it. So in this case, we take the what is this called? The clubs. The clubs, 2 of clubs. So in my deck, I'm just going to grab the 2 of clubs, and this is going to be my action deck through which my adventurer can discover information that the mentor knows. This is all what the mentor knows. The adventurer will basically access this through drawing a card and saying like, okay, now what is 2 clubs? 2 clubs is the Bornland Monastery. Now I get to know more about the monastery in Bornland. Now, as a player, as myself, I know this information because I've read through the book already. So there's a kind of a filter that you have to put in front of yourself of what you know and what your adventurer knows. Now, speaking of your adventurer, that's the next step. The mentor step is reading 1 page at a time, filling your table out with information that your mentor knows, your scroll pack, your magic crystal, your oracle, whatever it is that you're carrying or accompanies you on your journey. And now we're going to grab my little hero here. In this case, it is Captain Carmen Rouge. I'm basically just using stuff from Epic Tiny Pirates, just as an example. This is my character. Now, if you have a miniature and you're not exactly using the miniature in a role-playing game just yet, you can use that as well. I'm just using this meeple. I'm just going to put it here in the center of my action board. Now, my action board is the main mechanic, the main mechanism of how I, as a player, interact through my adventure. So this is my mentor. It's a spiritual sort of information base. It doesn't really do anything. It can't act within the adventure. It doesn't fight monsters. It doesn't open doors. It doesn't do anything, but it's just a gatherer of knowledge. But your adventurer is your true actionable hero. That is the character that you have a character sheet from the role-playing game that you're playing. And this is the character that is going to mine the mentor for knowledge and then act upon it within the adventure. So in the adventure phase, what you do is you choose to go to either it's just an action, or you rest. Actions cost energy. Rest gives you energy back. Now, energy, and I'm just going to grab these cubes just to demonstrate. And you could do anything in your own role-playing game. You can write them down, these points, on a piece of paper or something. I like to prefer to use cubes. So these cubes of energy, they actually allow you to take action, and the actions can be physical, mental, or mentor related. The physical actions that you take can be anything from opening a door to fighting a monster, whatever it is that that you need to act in order to do within the adventure. So say I want to fight a monster, then I go to act. It says here pay one action cube, so it just pays you. You just spend one. This, in the big scheme of things, is not a lot. You're going to end up with a lot more energy points, but it is to sort of prevent you from just acting all the time and not taking a rest action to recuperate some of that energy. So in this case, I would maybe fight a monster. It cost me one energy. And you can basically, however big your pool is, so say that I have like 7 energy here left, you can take actions with. Taking an action, a physical action, costs 1 cube. Research I'm going to come to in a minute. Taking a mental action, for instance, observing what's behind a door. So listening to like what's behind the door, because you don't know that there's like goblins waiting to ambush you and you want to preempt that. You as the player, you have maybe read that already in your adventure. You may have gone to like a door and already read ahead, because it's on the same page, that there's goblins waiting on the next level behind that door. And so you as the player would have that knowledge, but you as the adventurer would not. So the adventurer would then, for instance, say like, okay, I want to observe. I want to observe what's behind the door because I feel like there might be something going on. Well, that's going to cost you between 1 and 3 cubes, depending on the difficulty as indicated in your adventure module. If it's just something that is not listed, it may just cost 1. That's up to you. If you actually do have to do a test or something as a character, it may cost 3. If it's a really difficult test, like say that you just got hit over the head, you can't hear very well, the goblins are really super sneaky ninja goblins or whatever, and so it might cost you 3 cubes to do so. As you whittle down your energy pool, you're going to find that you can't do as many actions as you want anymore, so you're going to inevitably have to rest. Whenever you rest, and don't worry, I'm going to come back to the mentor a little bit later, but as you rest, you can either meditate, you can heal, once again, the difference between mental and physical, or you can interact with your mentor. Now, if you heal whatever health or life points you have in your system of role-playing game, but you also get 1 cube back. That is just an easy give for taking that action, so to speak. When you meditate, you get 3 cubes back because you're concentrating really on your mental part and you gain more energy back. It's basically the same as playing a board game too long. You run out of energy and run out of steam, and your mental capabilities are not as what they were when you started in. Now, along with this rest phase, you also get to read another page. So your mentor then also gains more information while you're resting, and thus you can parse another page. You get to advance your adventure, etc., etc. Now, what is about this mentor part? Because the physical and mental part are quite self-explanatory, but now the mentor part in the middle, you either have research or you have, well, what I would basically call essentially, I haven't put it down here yet, but it's more like relate or empathize, something with that. It kind of depends on what your item is. If it's an actual person that is tagging along with you, you might want to relate or empathize. If it's like a scroll or a magic crystal or a book or something, you might want to like take good care of it, like pack it up and like make sure that it is in good health, so to speak. This is more aggressive. This is more like an active part. This is more of a restive, like let's take it easy part. Now the difference in gameplay between these two is that in this case you roll a die. So you want to get in information, but you're not really pressed on getting good information or maybe any information at all. This is also a way to introduce essentially some random element to it and give you a chance to basically roll some dice for people who like to do that. This is more deterministic. I'll come with that in a little bit later. So in this case, you can roll a die to glean some information from your mentor as you are relating to them, empathizing with them, talking with them, or you are taking care of your book and you're leafing through it and you're, basically just not too concerned with getting information and more concerned with the well-being of your mentor. How do you roll a die? So there are 4 columns, and I've labeled them basically here 1 through 4. Right now, this is a little bit up in the air still, but if you just have a D6, you could also just say like 5 and 6 you re-roll, or maybe characters or plot or locations or items are more populated, so you might want to emphasize those. But say that you just roll a D6. Well, of course, I roll a 5. In this case, now I roll a 4. You roll a 4. It costs you either no, sorry, it doesn't cost you. This gains you back because it's in the resting area. So you could choose to not glean any information, but just get 4 energy back into your pool to use for actions. Why is that? That is because you also get information, actually. So this is like a double whammy. It may be that 4 actually has no information. Like maybe the items column has nothing in it just yet, especially at the beginning. More so, if it does have something in it, you still have to roll on the table as indicated by the numbers. Now, the ace information is something that you got for free. Remember that's what we said at the beginning. But then you have 2 through 10, and then you have the jack, queen, and king. The jack, queen, and king you can never get by rolling a die. 2 through 10 you could get. Let's just write a 10 here so it's actually clear. 2 through 10 you could get by rolling dice. Now, how can I roll a 10 on a 6-sided die? You can't. You can only roll up to 6. Now, if you roll 1, there's nothing there. You can say that's the ace, but the ace information you already have. So essentially, you just get like 1 energy back. You always get something in return. I always want to give something back to the player so you don't feel like your action has been wasted. And of course, you get to read and populate your table with more information items. So that's a nice thing as well. But 2 through 6, you actually get to go through the cards that you have in your actionable deck and basically say like, okay, I roll a 2. Well, let's see. Okay, I actually do have a 2 in there, which is really fortunate, which is really great because now I can actually tap into that. But I rolled an item, not a location. So it wasn't the information that I wrote down here. It is an item, which I don't have. I don't have a 2 there. Now, that still gives you back 2 cubes. So you don't go home empty-handed. But because you risked it and you weren't really concerned with getting information, you don't get any information because there's none there. Now, if I would roll here, then I get that information and I write that down in my journal. This is something I'm going to come back to later after I explain this because there's a little follow-up to how you read information. How you process information, but this is how you read it. So this is how you read from the table. Now, if I were to not want to rely on my dice, if I don't want something as random and I want to really take an action, I really research with my mentor some information, then I just get to draw from my deck. So this deck is going to be populated with all these cards as this table gets populated with information. So this deck grows bigger, and then this action basically just says, okay, I have to pay the cost of the card to draw it. So I draw the card, I see what it is, and then I have to pay 2 from my pool. If I don't have it, I don't get this information. This is simple. This is more deterministic, but it is also more costly. So this is random, and it gives you energy in return because you're not as concentrated, not as focused on getting that information. You're more about the well-being of your mentor. And here you're actively pumping it for information, and so you're actively leafing through your documents or your scrolls, or you're really pressing on the magical energies of your orb or whatever it may be. But that costs energy, and if you can pay the energy, great. You pay the energy. You pay 2 2 energy in this case, and then you get the information. And then, in fact, you just get that information really that you want, because anything that's in the table is represented by a card, so you know you're always going to get something. More so, you could get the Joker, the Queen, the King, even you can get any of the cards leading up to it, because those cards are in the deck. So you always have an opportunity of getting those cards. Now, the Joker, the Queen, and the King, I'm not exactly sure what value to connect to them. They may be 10, like the 10 card, because these are like major plot points and major characters, major items, major locations, and they're at the same level as the ace, but the ace you got for free just to get you started. But the Jack, the Queen, and the King, those are information items that you have to work towards to actually earn. Now, if it is the case that the information item is split up into multiple items, then you just get whichever one you choose to interact with, because that is the power of the research, is that you just get to choose. It's more deterministic. With the dice rolling, you actively just also get to choose if you really wanted to, because otherwise there's too much randomness in it. I'm not exactly sure, but that might be the way that how we go. We'll see how that basically pans out. Maybe it's always the first item, and then you check it off, and you go to the second item, check it off. In fact, now we get to the point where we know what information we have. How do we process it as the adventurer? So the adventurer keeps a solo journal handy. This is where the solo journaling comes in, the more descriptive part of role-playing games, where normally you would interact with your players and you would build a story communally. In this case, we're writing down the information, typical solo journal style. So there is some of the solo journal in here, and there is some of the random table generation in here, the RTG element of or subset of role-playing solo styles, but mainly it is used to parse the information from your adventure and get it into a table, roll for it or draw cards from it, Oracle style, and then write out your story. Now, how do you do this? So say we drew this card, or we rolled for it, and we have researched this information, and we know it's about Bornland and it's about the monastery. What we do then is we say, like, okay, we mark it off. We don't cross it through or anything. We just mark it off, and we add it to our story by adding an alphabetical letter, in this case A, because it's the very first item. The monastery in Bornland, that is something that we have now researched, and we are going to put that into our journal in chronological order, so we can actually now see as a journal what this adventurer is experiencing, what information they've gleaned from either their mentor or maybe from their surroundings, or whatever it may be that you find is a logical explanation. Because this is a solo journaling after all, so a solo journal is the connective tissue between what is happening either from a table or from an oracle or from our system here, and making the logical connection to make a flowing story, just like you would in the role-playing game. So in this case, maybe the information that I got from going to the inn, looking for work, I talked to my mentor. Let's just say I met up with one-eyed William. There's a Goonies reference for you. He told me all about a mysterious monastery in Bornland. Now, what can I do with this information? Well, now I know that there's a monastery that may hold some more information towards the Blue Tome. Maybe the Blue Tome is where it's held at. Probably not, I can say, because, Adventure Module has like 80 pages to it, so it's probably not. But now we have a link. So now that we've written it down, we have a sort of a logical story link towards this adventure. Now you just keep on going through your deck. Like this card, we can decide to actually take out of our deck now, because now we've gleaned all the information that we can from it. We've also marked it off on our table, on our mentor table. So now we know that that is something that the adventurer now knows, not just the mentor. And we go into the next phase. Now, if I have energy cubes left, I can decide to maybe travel towards that monastery if I wanted to. Or I can observe more about One-Eyed William or the inn itself, see if there's people from the monastery who are there, whatever it may be. Now, these are all wild assumptions. And of course, the difference between solo journaling and RTG, solo role playing, is that we actually have a module. And the module will logically connect the dots between locations, characters, items, and plot lines in a way that we don't necessarily have to do the mental exercise to actually do something with. So at this point, I may decide, okay, I've paid 2 for this card. That was the cost for taking this card out of the deck. But I may now decide that that's enough. I want to save whatever energy I have left because maybe there's bigger fish to fry. There's more cards to be claimed. I'm just going to leave it for there, and I'm going to go into the rest phase of my character, and I'm going to like meditate just to get some more cubes, for instance. Anytime when you go down to the rest, you trigger another mentor phase. So now I get to read the next page in this adventure and take information that I'll populate, my character can interact with, and then maybe make a more informed decision as to where to go next in Bornland and the monastery. That's it. That was a long half hour to basically explain very quickly what the draft concept of my A.M.P method is. A.M.P stands for Adventure, Mentor. I forgot what P stands for. Play, maybe? Sure, let's say play. As per the Dungeon Dive, who's doing something every Friday on solo RPGing, he identified 8 terms, scripted versus sandbox. This is definitely scripted because you're working off a booklet, an adventure module. Is it a systems or a tool? This in itself is going to be a tool. This is going to be a method to actually parse, translate adventure modules for solo play and do something with it. And this mechanism is also a tool. It can be put in any shape or form. Right now, it is subject to the mechanisms that I need to play this A.M.P solo method. But it is definitely a tool. It is not a system in itself. It doesn't come with stories and adventure modules by itself. Is it simple or is it complex? Well, that kind of depends how far this gets developed. I have a tendency to getting into more complex systems, but I really, really want to keep it simple and low effort because otherwise no one is going to use it, right? And then is it solo journaling or is it structure of play? It is actually neither. This is going to be the great breakthrough, I hope. It's going to be basically a different paradigm shift. It's going to be looking at adventure modules that you may have in your shelf. We all have adventure modules that came with RPG systems that we may have crowdfunded or that we just bought. And so even though solo journaling is part of it, with our narrative little aspect of connecting the dots of the information that we find, and structure of play, which is basically just RTGs, random table generation, that is also in here. Although, however, we can choose to do it more deterministic by just drawing the cards and paying for them, or rolling the dice and seeing what happens if we get some information or not. That's it. That is so far it for my my Story Tiles Raw edition. And let's just see where this goes. I'll see you next time, and happy exploring.